we're going to move on to our next session just before lunch. It is another panel discussion, and the topic is the Internet of Things versus cybersecurity. Which will win? Can I please call on stage Yoosuf Mohammed, founder and CEO of FAMY Consulting Services, Alexandre Horvath from Cryptix AG, Kuldeep Burra, MD of Hala Infos, and Saraswat, Vice President of Product Development at Mastercard. I hope I got everyone's name correct, and if I didn't, apologies.
So good afternoon. I think we are in between you and the lunch, and I think we will make it short. And the good part is, I think yesterday, one of the five chat session, I think it was covered, the security analysis in IoT. I think what we are going to do is we will give very specifics, very crisp perspective about what is IoT, what is security, and how both are running, and which is affecting what kind of thing. And today, we have a very distinguished panelist. And first of all, we will introduce ourselves, and then we will get into the topic. Okay, so I am Mohammed Yoosuf from Chennai, India. So I run a startup called FAMY Consulting Services, primarily focusing on digital transformation and cybersecurity, helping my customers, to take their digital transformation journey. So my experience in technology is about 30 plus years, and all throughout, in cutting-edge technology. Okay, and maybe Ankur, why don't you start your introduction?
Thanks, Yoosuf. So I am Ankur Saraswat. I am representing Mastercard Center for Advanced AI and Cyber Technology. As a business unit, we focus on leveraging the power of artificial intelligence, machine learning to develop cybersecurity products, mainly focusing on IoT security, fraud detection, blockchain, crypto, smart cities, anti-money laundering, etc. Looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Alexandre, introduce yourself. Yeah.
My name is Alexandre Horvath. I'm Chief Information Security Officer and Data Protection Officer at Cryptix. Cryptix is a Swiss-based venture building company who focuses mainly in fintech, and there we provide actually services based on blockchain.
Yeah, Kuldeep, why don't you introduce?
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Kuldeep. I represent Hala Infosec Private Limited. I come with about 18 years of experience into IT infrastructure management and sorry. I come with about 18 years of experience in IT infrastructure management and cybersecurity. So Hala Infosec Private Limited is a startup we've been running for the last 3 years into managed security services space. Thank you.
So all of us know about, Internet of Things. It's system connecting the common objects with the network internet. And it is one of the key digital technologies. And in fact, helping across all the business domains, all the business. And it is growing fast. The prediction is about next 3-4 years, it is going to be about 17% CAGR. Today, if you ask me, the market size of IoT is about 250 to 300 billion, which is going to be about 600 billion next 3 years. Okay, so that's the kind of growth that we are seeing. And from the devices standpoint, so we are seeing about 15 billion devices today, from IoT, and which is going to be double, in next 3-4 years. Okay, so that's a kind of growth. And within the IoT segment, there is a specialized one is the industrial IoT, which is about 75 billion today, which will be about 100 billion next 2-3 years. Okay, so having said that, and what's happening from the security standpoint? Yesterday, when we had sessions in metaverse, immersive technology, and Web 3.0, Web 3, and all those things, and one common theme that everybody talked about is the cybersecurity. And when you come to IoT, it has a different flavor of security threats. It is very, very specialized situation that arises in the IoT environment. For example, there was a report saying that about 1.5 billion incidents, the hacks have happened in first 6 months of 2021, last year. 1.5 billion incidents, in IoT alone, and it is growing. Okay, so what it means, I mean, I think if you see IoT, some of the very specific thing, no, which is not there in any other world, like in the web world or what, is the fragmentation of technology and fragmentation of the devices. You can see devices, the sensors and switches and the very sophisticated equipments, and running, no, very legacy technology to the high-end technology. And from the communication and networking standpoint, no, there are various protocols. Unlike in web, no, we all live with SSL and HTTPS kind of thing, which is sort of standardized. And now in Internet of Things, the communication technologies are multifold. So these things, the fragmentation and the legacy technologies are throwing a lot of challenges from the security standpoint. So when we want to approach security, probably, the best way to do that is a top-down approach. Security is all about managing the risk. Okay, all about managing the risk. The same is true for IoT also. The risk is also, no, a function of threat and associated vulnerability. And the third is the probability of the threat that is going to happen, and the impact of the threat. I mean, these are all the four parameters, which impacts that. Okay. To start with, probably I want to hear from the panelists. What are the key threats and the associated vulnerabilities, that we see? And especially, I want to hear from the panelists about something very specific to IoT. I mean, though it may be proliferating, and across other technologies also. So maybe to start with, Ankur, you want to
Yeah, sure. Thanks,
give your
Yoosuf.
view? Yeah.
So let me start with giving you an example of a cybersecurity incident which happened in 2017 in Vegas. So Vegas, we know, is famous for its casinos. So in one of the casino, a big one, so there was a big aquarium in the lobby of the casino, which has got a Wi-Fi enabled thermostats. So which used to send temperature related information to the central computer system for monitoring purposes. So the hacksters, they hack the thermostats, get into the CRM database of the casino, and send across maybe 10 GB of data to some location in Finland. So that is like, how smart these hacksters are. So we are against so smart, ahead of the curve fraudsters who are, always on the lookout to find these kind of vulnerabilities in the IoT system. So that is one. So the message is, however inconsequential a device may seem, irrespective of its usage in the overall context of the business, it is imperative to secure it. So as they say, the strength of a chain, it lies in the strength of the weakest link. So, so that is one. Second, to throw in some other stats from industry, from payment industry. So as of now, almost 75% of the fraud which are being reported on credit card transactions, so they are digital in nature. And by digital, I mean the physical card is not present. So 75% of the total fraud is digital. And out of this, almost one third is mobile transactions. So essentially, one in fraud happens through mobile phone transactions. So now with advent of IoT, and then we are having this 5G related releases, so the number of smartphone or the smart devices is only going to increase. So it, at the same time, it eases our life in terms of convenience, but at the same time, the security challenges are too big to be ignored. So we need to find a balance between these two, and the cybersecurity is the answer. Coming back to vulnerabilities and threats. So theoretically, vulnerability is defined as a weakness in the IoT system, which an outsider can take advantage of and gain access to the system. Now, after getting access to the system, he can execute commands on his wish. He can gain access to unauthorized data. That can be confidential data, maybe details of your credit card. And then he can also do some kind of denial of service attacks. So this is what vulnerabilities are. And when these vulnerabilities are exposed to threat actors and they start behaving in a negative fashion, these are called threats. So now these terms being defined, now where do I find vulnerabilities in my system? So vulnerabilities, they can be found in the hardware of the IoT system. So these are called hardware vulnerabilities. These are hard to detect. Like these are very complex and requires a lot of effort in terms of money, R&D, and all those things. mostly the OEMs, they are only involved in this, and this is an upcoming area of research. Second kind of vulnerabilities are software vulnerabilities. So these vulnerabilities are found in operating system, application software, uh, the the methods which have been defined or the guidelines of the IoT system, you can find vulnerabilities there as well, and the human component is also there. So this is how you can find out the vulnerabilities. Now, how to address those vulnerabilities? So there are n number of products which we talk about, which can take care of the cybersecurity needs. But essentially speaking, so there are three things if we take care of, we can address a major portion of the threat which is coming from these vulnerabilities. If we can secure the communication channels. So most of the vulnerabilities, they lie in insecure communications. Messages being unencrypted, files, file transfer happening through non-standard file transfer protocol, data being unmasked, so these kind of things. So if we are able to, secure our communication channel, so nobody will be able to intrude into our system via those messages and have access to unauthorized data. So that is one. Second is updates, timely updates. So all these OEMs, the device manufacturers and the service providers, so they work day and night to find vulnerabilities in the system, and then they also come out with a solution, so which we call as patch. So it's the responsibilities of everyone being a part of the IoT system to make sure that every device, every component of the IoT system is up to date in terms of security patch. So that is two. Third is authentication hygiene. So we talk about, so by authentication, I mean my system should be sufficiently strong to make sure that a person is authenticated in a proper way. And by authentication, I mean, I am sure that the person is the same what he is trying to be. So he is the rightful owner of the device, or maybe let's say in terms of payments, you are presenting your card or you are using your, let's say, smartwatch or smartphone to make a transaction, you are the rightful owner of the device. So this is what authentication means. And then some very generic things like, using strong password, changing them very frequently, maybe using some stronger and sophisticated things like two-factor authentication and biometrics. So that is also being integrated into most of the authentication and identity management solution. So,
Okay, thanks, Ankur. I think you touched upon two key things. One is the 5G from the communication perspective and the authentication. And I'm sure that, this is a very important element, and the vulnerabilities and the associated threat. I want to hear from other two panelists also. So before that, I just remember one thing about the authentication. And last year, there was a company called Verkada. It's a San Mateo-based company. They do a video surveillance management. It's a platform. The platform was hacked. They were managing about 150,000 surveillance cameras, across hospitals and schools and jails and all those things. And intruders were able to get into the system and able to steal the images and all the other information. And when they were investigating, they found very interesting. There were about 100 of their employees were knowing the admin password. Okay. 100 of their employees, and if that is the case, everybody knows the admin password, and the intruder knows the admin password, he was able to hack. The authentication and the strong authentication and related aspects is very important. Okay, so that, Alexandre, why don't you give your perspective about, anything on the vulnerabilities and the threat, specific to IoT?
Thank you, Yoosuf. Well, you were asking also about the trends. We all know that we have now 5G, we have multi-cloud solutions. So all these nice things were actually built to improve our services, to make also customers and client sides better, faster. But if we look at the downside, or at the dark side, how they call it, you can actually also use that to make life actually not easier but harder, so to say. And if I especially look also at botnets, especially, most of you, I'm sure, are also familiar with the Burra botnet. But if we make it even more powerful, let's say we add artificial intelligence to it. So then we can actually take really nice examples. I mean, we're in a hotel, so let's face if I manage to actually break into the card system and then lock the doors, well, then I can just keep people in their room, like an example. Or let's say in the car industry, if I can take over any component in a car, well, then I can either press on the brakes at any time. I can check where actually the car is. Yeah, so I can really do some bad stuff out there. And I think, well, these are things we have to look at. These are things which will actually increase. And so it's really important for us to know what is on our network. As we know, Internet of Things can be also in our at home. Smart stuff like, well, if I have a micro oven and I attach it to the internet, obviously somebody could actually also connect to it. So always check that as well. Or even a television. I mean, they also get more smart and smart. That's also one thing. We have it in the corporate field, but also at home. Obviously, if I can take over the control, I could make a lot of televisions now have also cameras on it. I can turn on, I can actually watch what you're doing at home, I can watch what you're doing in your office. So those kinds of threats are, well, I wouldn't say new, but with the more bandwidth, as I said, more also things well, which can be connected to the internet. We really have to be careful. We have to be prudent and to always know what is actually, what kind of devices have an IP addresses and are on our network.
Yeah, I think you brought up a very interesting point and little alarming also, that your TV at home, is a vulnerable element, because somebody who comes for your maintenance, for example, you don't know what he is doing, is right. I mean, he can implant anything. I mean, today your TV is connected with the net. Okay, so that's the kind of vulnerability I think Alexandre is talking about. And you also brought up another point, like a botnet. But this is very specific to IoT. But IoT is a low-hanging fruit, and it is a breeding ground, for creating a distributed denial of service attack. Okay, so, and all of you know about the Mire botnet attack in 2016 and 17. There was a company called Dyn, and it's a performance management company based out of Silicon Valley. I think now it is bought over by Oracle, if I remember correctly. So what happened was, I mean, there was a botnet attack, and that has happened through all the IoT devices. The intruder was able to implant this the Mire malware and able to attack the Dyn platform. And because of that, people like their customers like Twitter and CNN and whatnot. I mean, people when they went black for many hours actually. Okay, so this, in my opinion, is a very low-hanging fruit. Okay, so now Kuldeep, I mean, I want to hear from you about the threat and vulnerability, but more importantly, I also want to hear what are the solutions that we have, especially so you are running a managed security platform. I mean, extended monitoring system and other things, especially when you are also focusing on the industrial IoT kind of thing. So I want to hear from you, touch upon the threat and vulnerabilities, and more importantly, how the platform like XDR can help in terms of solving this issue.
Sure. Thanks, Yoosuf. I think we've heard quite a few examples from threats and vulnerabilities perspective from the other two panelists. That was more from the attacker side. So I think, let me also give you what can be done and what solutions are available, security solutions are available from the defender's point of view as well. So I think it is very, first of all, in the world of interconnected systems where we don't have, where there is lack of, physical boundaries, right? And then improperly configured systems, and then there is much more. So I think, it is very imperative and essential to have a constant monitoring of all the IT and IoT OT devices, particularly where we have 24/7 security monitoring of eyes on the glass monitoring on the interconnected systems against the properly configured threat detection use cases against the MITRE ATT&CK framework that we talk about. It's very essential to have meaningful threat detection use cases configured And not just that, it just doesn't, it isn't just enough to have a constant monitoring, but I think the security monitoring and security engineering go hand in hand. While you have a constant monitoring of your IT and OT devices, it is also essential for you to look upon the engineering side of the security solutions, where you basically focus on the life cycle management of the products of the security solutions, from hot fixes to patches, and the constant updates that the OEMs release. I think thirdly, I think it's also important to have a proper governance, risk and compliance, GRC, do a regular, a frequent testing of your security testing of your IT and OT systems, to proactively identify the threats and vulnerabilities, and then implement the recommendations based on the reports. And not just that, what I've seen, personally in my experience, most of the corporates, they do the security testing and assessments, go back and implement the recommendations, but they just stop there. More than 50% of the corporates, they don't do the revalidation of the findings that arise from the security testing and assessment reports. So I think that's very important. And finally, I think from the compliance perspective, it is also very essential to do a gap assessment across your IT and OT systems network from time to time, and kind of benchmarking every time you do a gap assessment. That's also very essential. And then, once you benchmark, it is important for you to improve upon the benchmarking over a period of time. So I think these are quite a few important points that come across my mind to address the issues.
Yeah. So I think, Kuldeep, you brought up a very interesting point about the GRC, the governance and risk and compliance. And I also want to touch upon the standardization, before that, how it evolves from the IoT security standpoint. And before that, I want to go a little deep into what you talked about, the security monitoring thing. But in a traditional web world, the monitoring, has evolved a lot. Today we are talking about extended, monitoring system, XDR kind of thing, extended detection and response, including the security incident and event management system, threat intelligence, SOAR, security orchestration, automation, and response, and user and entity behavior analytics, plus the endpoint detection and response. All of them have been sort of getting integrated, triangulating what's happening in your whole ecosystem and able to fix the issue. But my question to you is, because you have been running this platform, and is how well this kind of the technology, this kind of interoperable technologies can be leveraged entirely in the IoT and the OT environment.
I think that's a very good point, Yoosuf. I think if we go back a decade, where we were talking about traditional SIM systems and parallel monitoring of multiple systems, where we're talking about endpoint detection and response as one, and then we have SIM in particular. Over a period of time, the threat landscape has evolved, and then that demanded a lot of evolution of the cybersecurity solutions and technologies in parallel. And it's a constant dispute. It's a constant fight between the two as well, right? So I think from traditional 24/7 SIM monitoring, we moved on to managed detection and response, which we now call as managed extended detection and response, where your SIM is integrated with your SOAR for orchestration and automation. And then that's in turn integrated with your threat intelligence, where you can also have multiple security solutions integrated. So I think it's just one integrated system with a single pane of glass monitoring, and that gives you a contextual and meaningful summary of all the insights and the security insights that that happen in a given network. So it's very essential. I think it's very useful and essential to have an integrated system like that, and eases the job of an analyst to basically monitor, because it's more of the it's more of the security intelligence and threat intelligence coupled with the human intelligence, which will give you the fruitful results.
Okay, good. And so Ankur, to you, I mean, we talked about the governance and compliance, and you are coming from the domain, from the industry where the standardization, governance, and compliance is the backbone of your business, right? So, can you throw some light about what it means from the IoT perspectives?
Yeah. So talking about standardization, maybe let me talk about importance of data and artificial intelligence in the context of cybersecurity. So we talked about advent of 5G and how it is going to affect the entire landscape. So there is a saying that 90% of the data on this planet, it has been generated in last 2 years only. And Yoosuf mentioned that there are 15 billion IoT connected devices at this point of time. So there are different reports citing different numbers. Some says the most conservative one estimates the number of IoT devices for next year at 30 billion. So imagine the amount of data which would be generated in coming years, and we are not not up to the mark as far as storage of this data is concerned. The big data is not going to be big enough to to be capable of storing this data. That is one. Now, for a data scientist, having data but not leveraging it, it's the biggest sin. So that's where the standardization also comes into picture. So this data, once generated, it needs to be managed, it needs to be standardized, it needs to be stored in a secured way, it needs to be transferred, and then some actionable, some models need to be run on this, and the result would be some actionable insights which need to be shared with the wider world. So another point for standardization is, in today's world where every device is connected, it's not possible to work in silos. I am only bothered about this particular aspect of cybersecurity, and rest is somebody else's business. So this is not going to work. So we need to attack this particular problem in a holistic manner. And whatever learnings I have, I need to share with the wider audience. So this is about standardization. The next thing which I wanted to discuss about is governance. Now this AI thing, many people, the critics of AI, they say, it is a black box. So what's happening using AI models? So there is a bias, there is an inherent bias, which we might not know at this point of time. So these governance, let's say for example, for fraud detection, so my model, so it has seen in the past, what kind of fraud behaviors come from a credit card transaction. But it does not know, when I'm using my smart watch to making a payment, or maybe a phone tap, so what defines a fraud? So let's say my wife is wearing my watch and it is being used to make a transaction at a grocery store. Is it a fraud? Or is it not a fraud? So incorrect definition of the labels and execution, so it can lead to an unpleasant customer experience. So the governance also comes into picture, that there is no bias, the models are accurate, and as soon as we have newer ways of communicating as far as IoT is concerned, that comes into picture, my model should be able, or my AI system should be able to do justice to it.
Thank you. I think I'm getting a signal that we are running short of time, so we will conclude with Alexandre. Alexandre, I mean, you talked about some of the, leading IT technologies and 5Gs and other things, which are more vulnerable, from the IoT security standpoint. How do you see that, standardization and governance and compliance, from that perspective? So,
well, I still think standardization and certifications are an important thing. Maybe I will also just quickly talk about there is actually an industrial IoT maturity model, which you can also download. It's roughly 130 pages, so easy over the weekend. Basically, there are three main parts about governance, enabler, and hardening. So about governance, we just heard a couple of things, but if you already have other standards or programs in place like cybersecurity, so you're tracking it hard, you're already on a good way. Enabler is like you have already who can actually access your devices. So this is also important. I mean, as we all also heard, I mean, if I can basically put on some HP clothes and I can go towards your printer and everybody lets me actually work on that machine, that would be bad. I mean, the same thing for TVs as we just discussed before. That's also bad. So basically, you definitely also have to know what's happening there. And then the last part is the hardening part. Obviously, it's also important that those devices are given the minimum rights. I mean, also limit their maybe also even their internet access. And also maybe to create some virtual LANs around specific for those kind of devices. So all that kind of stuff you will find also in that standard or maturity model. You can actually find it under iiconsortium.org. So just if you're very interested in it, and I think those kinds of things are important. And if you're really into IoTs, definitely have a look at it, and yeah, let me know what you think about it.
Okay, thank you. And so we'll open up for the question. Before that, yesterday there was a question about the standardization and some of the frameworks somebody was asking that from the IoT security standpoint, there were few standards that came up but didn't pick it up, like the open interconnect framework and open connectivity forum kind of thing. But there is one which came up a few months before, which came from Industrial IoT Consortium and the Digital Twin Consortium. These two people came together and came out with a IoT security maturity model. Very, very interesting. And if you have some time, go through that. I mean, it is available in the internet. They have come out with similar to what NIST is talking about, like identify, detect, protect, detect, respond, recover. They have talked about how the maturity model can be defined from the security standpoint. It seems to be very interesting, okay? And go through that and it will be very helpful. So with that, I will open it up for any questions or any comments or any of your views from audience.
I think I'll just take about a minute, Yoosuf, to quickly summarize. And the topic of the day is basically IoT versus cybersecurity, which will win. I think being on the defender side, I would really be happy to say, obviously, cybersecurity will win. But then it's not the case, because like I mentioned earlier, it's a constant fight between the attackers and the defenders, right? I think this reminds me of a very simple ITIL mechanism, which we probably came across more than a decade back, is the PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, and act. It's a very simple mechanism that takes you back in ages and implement the control. Basically, you plan, you implement, you verify, and then take actions again. So I think if this is implemented properly and then this is verified properly, I think I wouldn't say it will actually protect you from any of the cyber attacks, but it will definitely minimize the exposure to the risks and threats.
Okay, thanks, Kuldeep. Any questions? Yeah, please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon. So my question is to Alex, or maybe the panel can help him. My name is Shivani, founder, Kuldeep Technologies. So we heard the example of the fish tank hacking and also the television hacking, all the internet connected devices. I want to ask this question, like, who takes the responsibility to ensure that the end users are aware of the weak spots? And who takes the accountability to make sure that it is solved for them?
You want to do that? Yeah.
Well, that's always a good question. Who is responsible for it? Well, I mean, if you buy any device, from that point on which you buy it, I mean, let's take a mobile phone. You definitely already have to update. I don't know how many updates directly. Otherwise, you're already vulnerable. So same thing, obviously, for other devices like a TV. But well, I mean, as soon as you basically connect it to your network, I would say, well, definitely the customer has some responsibility from that point of view. If there's obviously hopefully the company also gives you some advice how you have to obviously update and maintain the device. But on the other hand, the industry definitely also helps, as we just mentioned. This also capability model should bring kind of the baseline of a standard to a higher level. So at the end of the day, also customers should get some benefit out of it. But yeah, so as I said, if it's also your home, definitely check whatever you put onto your network, and yeah, I'll update it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I want to give an analogy like a cloud security. I mean, everybody asks what is a cloud security. So the cloud providers are responsible for what they manage, end to end. Wherein, I mean, when you are putting certain thing in the cloud, you are responsible. You are responsible. So it's a joint responsibility. But maybe we can talk a little more later.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sorry,
Any other questions?
to interrupt.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take one more question and we'll have to wrap it after that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bahruz. I'm Information Security Manager. My question is about the identity management. As you know, the identity management is one of the main domain of the cybersecurity. And why, maybe you know the reason, that's why I'm asking this. For example, can you imagine every country create your own identity management system inside the country, and one system, single sign-on, which you can imagine is the enterprise level federation services between all the countries. And with this kind of purpose, you can solve all identity management problem. Why or we cannot do this, or we don't want to create this kind of system between all countries around the world?
Yeah, when you talk about identity access management and single sign-on, I think the banking and financial services is very close to that. Maybe I will hear from Ankur, and if anything we can add.
So this is one of the main problems. So as you know, so there are two parts of it. One is authorization and one is authentication. So authorization is all about who can access what. Yeah. While the authentication is the match between what you are presenting to be and what you actually are. So this IT management, so this is an upcoming field. So we ourselves have been investing a lot in some startups as well, wherein, n number of things like the devices most commonly used, the IP addresses, the locations, your transaction pattern, and like whatever data we can get about you, we combine all those, create some models to create a digital identity for you. Mm-hmm. So next time when I see you coming into my system, I'll compare your credentials with what I have already determined as a benchmark for your digital identity, and if it matches, then I will allow you access to my systems. So that ways, so this was particularly about payments. If we can collaborate between other data sources as well. So this digital identity concept, it can take further dimensions.
Okay, I think we're running short of time. If you have any other questions, we can catch up during the lunchtime or later. And thank you all, and I thank all my co-panelists, okay, Ankur, Alexandre, and Kuldeep. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoosuf.
Thank you to our panelists for sharing their thoughts and ideas with us today on the topic. Thank you so much. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to disperse for lunch now. But before we open up the buffet, I would like to request you all to proceed towards the promenade again for another group photo today, because the one yesterday was terrible. So we're going to try and do that again today. So other groups are already waiting outside, so I do request you all to proceed to that area again and maybe get a better one this time. Thank you.